All right, America, let's do this. Yeah, that actually happened on Tuesday night. This is Common Threads. We do this every Thursday night here in Brooklyn, New York. 2 guests, 1 hour. The goal is to find common ground. We're going to debate and talk respectfully about all the hot issues that have happened. And usually we say the last week, but in this case, it's just the last 48 hours. I don't know what time is at this point. None of us have slept in many days. And lots of Americans probably haven't slept since election night, either because they've been celebrating or because they've been drinking a lot and they can't fall asleep. Let's bring in our guest. Oh, by the way, sound off in the comments. There's comments on whatever platform you're watching: X, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitch. Let us know what you think throughout the show. Ask your questions. We'll pitch them on over to the guests who we're going to bring in now. We got Diana London. She's a Republican political analyst, former congressional aide, a Newsmax contributor. She also advises several pro-Trump super PACs. Nice to have you here, Diana. And Christopher Bruce is a Democratic strategist, worked on the Stacey Abrams gubernatorial campaign in Atlanta. I love saying the word gubernatorial. Founder of the Bruce Group Consultancy. Diana and Chris, thanks to you both for being here.
Great to be with you tonight.
Thanks.
All right, absolutely. So I guess I say, to the victor go the spoils. I guess we got to start with Diana. Diana, give me your sense about what went so right for Donald Trump and the Republicans in the election on Tuesday.
Well, thank you for having me tonight. It's so good to be with you both. And, when you're talking about sleeping, I don't think I've slept in like 2 weeks. So we're looking for it. I slept good last night. I'll say that. But, um, I won't gloat too much, but I will say this. If anybody was paying attention the last 4 years, especially the last year, they would have saw this coming if they were actually paying attention and traveling around the country and talking to people. That was a resounding mandate from the American people that they were unhappy with what was happening in this country, what was happening with our economy, what was happening with the border and immigration, what was happening with inflation and gas and the wars overseas. And everybody, just when you traveled around, you talk to people at coffee shops, and I'm talking about people who didn't even vote for Trump. They're like, I don't like him, but I don't like this economy. And under Trump, I was making great money, and prices were lower, and I wasn't worried about locking my door at now time. And so there was just this sentiment that was happening, and so I had peace all that night because I just knew it, because I was traveling around talking to people, and they were making it very clear. And this is all the demographics. This is women. This is our African American communities. This is our Hispanic communities. They all had the same sentiment. The economy, something had to change, and they knew with Trump he would change it, and they knew what he would do, and they believed in that. And so they went and they voted, and they made a very, very loud statement. And so I think the mandate for Trump is going to be clear, and I'm excited about it. So that's my thoughts.
I have no doubt you are excited, as millions of Americans clearly are as this election week goes along. We're going to be clear. I mean, there's still a whole lot of races we don't know. We're waiting to see what happens with the House. Right. We still got to see what happens with the U.S. Senate, how things are going to fall here. Chris, it's not a Reagan Mondale style landslide. I don't think we'll ever have that again. But in terms of a basically 50-50 split electorate, I got to sit there and say this is as close to a landslide as we're going to see in modern politics. Chris, what do you think went so wrong either for Vice President Harris or Democrats in other races? Because clearly, you look at the polls, there was a lot of enthusiasm, fundraising, this and that, but the numbers aren't even close. The popular vote differential right now is 4.5 million votes in favor of Donald Trump. Chris, what's your postmortem on all this?
Well, first, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on, especially to have this type of conversation. So everybody's going to play Monday morning quarterback. After the game, if you lost, and everybody's looking and saying, what happened? And there's several things that happened. We're not just talking about the last 4 years. We're talking about the last 8 years. And the American people have a lot of amnesia of what happened during the Trump era, and they jumped into a Biden era. So let's be real about it. There was a messaging gap that happened with the Democratic Party from the campaigns to the people. Let's be real about it. Let's call out the issues that were going out with putting reproductive health care out there instead of looking at the economy, instead of looking at immigration. And we can be real about the other issues that were going on in America at the time. So we do have wars that were happening. We do have issues with inflation. But I would push back on a lot of that as well. The American people have been inundated with misinformation and disinformation. And sometimes it's hard to cut through those type of lies. When it comes down to it, America still has the strongest economy in the world. And if there's any difference within that, I would love to hear what other economy there is. That doesn't matter, though. Like you said before, one side won, another side lost, and one side lost pretty badly. We need to find out, looking at the numbers, the people, and the people who did not vote. That's what I'm mostly interested in. Those 60 million Americans who could have voiced their opinion but didn't. And so we need to figure out what's happening within our country and the apathy that comes within it too.
Diana, I would love to get your take here on polling. Obviously, I think it's safe to say pollsters have just had no idea in the last 10 years how to accurately reflect Donald Trump support. I mean, we had this whole kind of controversy with the polling community this year, weighting by recalled vote in an effort to try and maybe slightly over-index Trump support. But for all the 50-50 polls, weren't even close. Diana, how do you view the role of polls, especially with an eye towards future races? I mean, obviously, this is going to be Donald Trump's last race to run, but Republican strategists and people in the know like you're still going to be contingent on a lot of key battleground swing state polls to help determine your own messaging and your own path forward. I, I I'm at an absolute loss for why polls got it wrong. What's your thought?
Well, I want to push back just a little tad bit on Christopher's statement regarding, um, you know, the disinformation and things like that. So I understand that this goes with the polls too. Where people get their information now is not the mainstream media. They get them from podcasts like this and other, very large influencers and online sites, which I actually think is good because I think we need more independent news because our corporate media is owned by big donors that have an agenda and push an agenda, which is a prime example of what we look like with the polls and the information that people were getting from the mainstream media. They were in the bag for Harris the entire time that she was running and with Biden. Every day you went on and you would have thought Harris was winning by a landslide. They were in the bag for her every single day. It was 99-1 news coverage regarding Donald Trump. And so I don't know where we talk about the disinformation, because if you turned on the television, Donald Trump was a racist and a Nazi, and all of his policies were going to end the entire world, and we were going to go into a depression, and the world was going to end under Donald Trump. And that was just not the case. People were tired of that. So they were going on these independent news sites where they had people that they trusted that were bringing facts and were poring over the actual information that they felt were important. So I understand maybe the sentiment there inside where you think maybe, but I just don't think that's the case. The mainstream media was in the bag for her every single day. If you looked at the polls, they were wrong. But if you looked at independent polls and polls that were funded by, universities or independent people, you saw the numbers. They didn't know who she was. They didn't like Biden's administration and his policies. They liked him maybe as a person, but they also felt like that she covered for him for 4 years and his cognitive decline. And so there was a lot of mistrust there. They didn't know who she was. They didn't know what she stood for. She came out, the messaging was all over the place. And when she came out and said to them, would you change anything about the next 4 years? And she said no. That there was nothing that she would change. That is not what the American people wanted to see. If you watch the polls, regardless of where they were fluctuating on percentages of who, one thing was very clear. They were not happy with the economy. They didn't like what was going on. Inflation was high. And when she said, I wouldn't change anything, they checked out. They were like, well, something's got to change because my groceries are incredibly high and I'm paying double than what I paid 4 years ago. So with the polling, and so I'll get back to the point, JD, on this. With the polling, it's a very interesting time in this country with polling because people were terrified to talk about if they were going to support Donald Trump. They were worried about getting targeted. They were worried about a lot of different things. And we've never had that in our history with a political candidate. People would just usually say, yeah, I'm supporting them and why. And, they felt like they had free speech, but not under Trump. So people would just not answer the phone, or they would just not tell people who they were voting for. And so I think with the polling, it's just a little bit different because people just are afraid to discuss really how they feel, be targeted, or to somehow be hurt. So, but I also think that polling and the media is going to have a lot of reflecting these next few weeks and these next few months. And something's got to change because it's unacceptable, the lies that are being perpetuated. It's unacceptable how they are, basically using polls as a suppression point for candidates. Nobody trusts them anymore. So let's hope that they get the message and the American people basically told them that we don't trust you and we're not going to do business with you, or we're not going to share our opinions with you, and maybe they'll change. So,
Chris, what's your response?
Well, let's start off with, I recognize the name of the show is Common Thread, but I don't think we're going to agree on this one. But when it comes down to it, the former president, Donald Trump, had the most amount of media coverage of any candidate ever in the history of the United States. So we can go into which policy pros and what back information we can get into it. But I think that is misinformation going into Harris. Vice President Harris had more media coverage than former President Donald Trump. And to this day, it's going to continue that way. When it comes to the polls, I have no idea. I know that there was over $1 billion spent on these campaigns, and these polls were astronomically wrong, especially when it comes down to the polling in Iowa. When you're saying at the end of the race, you thought that Iowa was going to go to Harris, and she lost astoundingly in Iowa as well. that's a problem. So I'm not calling for an investigation, but we also know if it is tighter than it should be, then you're going to ask for another poll. If it is just a knockout, then you say, well, maybe I don't need to do a poll every week because polls do cost a lot of money. Now, I also believe that polls are anonymous. I've never had a poll where it's just like, hey, Chris, we're going to publish your name or anything else. People are normally able to express their viewpoints within it. But these pollsters, this was horrible. And I think it was misleading the American people as well.
You know, I've defended pollsters in the polling industry, at least after the last few elections, because while I know that they've largely gotten the numbers wrong, you know, if you really look at the overall popular vote, you know, they have been so close where I'm like, all right, well, this is kind of understandable, but this is way off. And to Chris's point, I totally forgot about that Ann Seltzer poll out of Iowa, because for me, that was already like 100 years ago, even though I think it was already only like 4 or 5 days ago. But clearly that got that wrong. Chris, I'm going to stay with you for this next one because something Diana said kind of remind me of this. You had comparisons made, not necessarily from the vice president herself, but from a lot of other very vocal Democrats. These comparisons to Nazi Germany, comparisons to Hitler, vice presidential candidate Tim Walz did make the comparisons there at that MSG rally. And Chris, it really seems as if making the referendum against Donald Trump did not nearly work as well as what voters wanted to hear, which is, what is Harris going to do? Your first day in office, your first 100 day in office. Chris, how do you sit there and look back and say, man, they tried to label Donald Trump and it clearly just didn't work?
Right. I think it goes down to messaging. When it comes down to it, Democrats do not have the best message towards the American people. And it really comes down to plenty of things, including having a big tent. So you have such a diverse group that you have to go and label to, and you're actually perpetuating towards. So a lot of times that messaging doesn't get through. But I can tell you, Vice President Harris said, hey, we're going to go ahead and give a $25,000 tax credit for people who are first-time home buyers. That is a message that resonated with people. When it came to raising to a $6,000 child tax credit, that's something that can resonate with people who are dealing with these type of issues going along all together. But labeling former President Donald Trump is Donald Trump. I think that people have accepted who he is. People have accepted when he does go on camera and he lies blatantly. And for some reason, they still go and vote for him. So there's not really much to say towards it. Labeling a person, people know who Donald Trump is and they accept him for he is. And when it comes down to it, they're going to continue to defend him and they're going to continue to go forward with it. Power likes to stay in power. And when you're out of power, you look at the person who can get you into power. And I think that's one of the reasons why they did actually vote for the former president and now the president-elect.
Diana, did anything surprise you? I mean, I'm sure you were very bullish on a Trump victory, but I mean, were you thinking the victory would be as big as it was?
I knew it would be because, like I was saying, I was traveling around the country and, you know, I was talking to every demographic of person and they were saying, listen, I'm not going to say it out loud, but I'm voting for Trump because when Trump was president, my life was good when it came to the economy. They were expanding businesses. They were employing more people. They were making more money. The optimism in the country was good. You know, I want to push back. Sorry, Chris. I want to push back a little bit on when you were talking about the news coverage real quick. I know. But yes, he got a lot of news coverage, but it was 99% negative. That's what I was trying to say. They covered him all day, but it was negative. They never said a single word. He could have cured cancer and they would have told him he was the devil, that it was the wrong cure for cancer. I mean, Trump could do nothing right in the media. And I just think it was, I applaud the American people for not rewarding the media for their blatant lies against him. And so back to your question regarding if I predicted this, I saw it. And I mean, if you were paying attention, you would have seen it. You would have known it was coming. It was brewing. The economy is the number one thing that leads an election. If the economy is good, people really actually don't care about the rest of the stuff. But when they're not making enough money and they're having to choose between a ballet class for their child and different groceries on their floor or in their fridge, That's not something that the American people want. If they have to choose between, or businesses have to choose between laying off people or expanding their business. I mean, it's a very uncomfortable thing. And I know firsthand because I work with expansions of businesses in my private business with consulting. And, these people were so frustrated because they feel like that their purpose in life is to create jobs and growth for their workers and to, give them more money and create a great American dream for them. And they were having to lay off people and they were having to cut salaries, and it was devastating to them. And they were so frustrated. And, it just, nobody wants to see that. So when you're traveling around the country, I saw it. And, another thing, the reason why I saw it in some of our border states was because of immigration. And I know we'll get to that, but because of the crime. I spent a lot of time in Winter Park, Florida, which is north of Orlando. And this is a beautiful town. It's a town that is just filled with the American dream and jobs. And you walk around and families are outside playing with their kids and everybody's walking down Park Ave and dining. And there's families of all different demographics there. And most people don't know, but they were targeted by the Colombian and Chilean cartels. And they came in and they were robbing homes in the middle of the night at gunpoint. And they were breaking into cars and stealing cars. And this is just a quiet town north of Orlando that is just filled with regular everyday people. And this is actually a town that is more democratic. It's a blue area. But this time it was a little bit different because they were completely targeted by illegal cartels coming in and out of the country, and they couldn't catch them. So I was paying attention, talking to people, and I knew it was gonna happen.
So first of all, I'm going to bring up this comment here from Joe Lombardo. In fact, if the media reported half of what Donald Trump did right during his presidency, the whole country would be different for the better. To the point of the economy, Chris, here's the thing is that, I think multiple things can be true at once. I've been asked so many times the last few years, if the economy is so great, why don't people feel it? And I think multiple things can be true at once. It can be true. GDP is incredibly strong. It can be true if you loved your 401ks under Donald Trump, then you really love them under Joe Biden because the stock market continued to hit new all-time highs when Biden was president. It can be true that unemployment was at or near historic low. Right now, it's only at 4.1%. There are so many big picture economic indicators to look at and say, hot damn, the Biden economy is scorching hot and it's working for people. And yet, Chris, when you go to these swing states, you go to Northampton County, Pennsylvania, how's the economy for you? How's your personal economic situation? Like, well, I just had to pay $3.80 for gas. So to me, all these things can be true at once. But to me, Chris, this is a messaging thing. I think Donald Trump is a wildly effective messenger. He can sell, he can spin, he could take something that's objectively bad news and figure out a way to make it an applause line at his rallies. And Joe Biden has an incredibly weak spot when it comes to be able to effectively communicate. Chris, how do you view the economy and how Democrats were unable to sell their version of it to skeptical Americans?
Well, let me jump right into leading off where you left off. He can also lie. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. So this is going to be a common theme in this issue. When it comes to media coverage, yes, when you are saying that there are people who are eating their pets at a time, which is a blatant lie that caused bomb threats and other threats in a certain area, that's going to garner news coverage. And I'm sorry, it's pretty hard to spin that into something that's positive. When you're saying that there are people who are immigrants or look like immigrants, not even documented towards it, and you're posting on your social media saying that these are the type of people who are going to come and rape your children, that's a problem. It's kind of hard to spin it that way. And other media outlets like Fox News weren't exactly painting Vice President Harris in the best way. So we'll probably keep going back on news coverage of certain presidents or anything else. But when it comes down to it, I'm pretty sure my other co-hosts here did not take a horse dewormer during COVID because the former president said that was a way to cure COVID. That's another way that you really can't spin things. When it comes to the economy is the economy. Like you said, it is red hot. Somebody's making money. It's not everyone, which deals with another issue that comes along with what Vice President Harris was saying. There's a reason why she wanted to tax the ultra rich, people who are making over $400,000. That is not the majority of Americans. So yeah, there are some people who are doing extremely well right now, and there are others who are struggling. That's what she was trying to correct on day one if she had taken office. Now, the things I've heard from the former president, now president-elect, I'm going to put in tariffs on Chinese goods. Well, that is going to increase prices. I've never seen a time when putting in tariffs on something has actually lowered down prices. I'm an attorney. I am not exactly the biggest economist, but I know when you raise the price of something, it does not go down. It goes up. So we'll figure out about the economy. I think a lot of people who are hurting are probably going to hurt even more at this time. But like you said before, the economy has been hot at this time. Former President Trump actually built off of Obama's economy that he had left for Trump, and he rode that wave until COVID happened. And we saw what happened, and we saw again when Biden had brought back the economy as well. So we'll see what happens in these next 4 years.
I will say, and this is my attempt to be as like good faith a player right down the middle as possible. Like, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of media coverage and like the eating cats and dogs thing taken, I think I don't know if I'd say taken out of context, but I do feel like there's a lot of on the left, like the oft repeated indication of what Trump said after Charlottesville, good people on both sides. It's like if you go back and you'll watch the entire thing, and it is a long, winding answer. I get it. Donald Trump is an imprecise speaker, but so is Joe Biden. And you actually understand the context of like what Trump said. Trump did repeatedly condemn the bad actors at that group. He then just kind of took it a little further and tried to a little bit give it a both sides treatment, which is why he got kind of caught in the mud. And yet that was oft repeated. Donald Trump has repeatedly said he's not going to sign a federal abortion ban, but up until Election Day, that was still something Democrats were saying. And then the opposite is true as well. There's a ton of stuff that people on the right were saying, well, Harris is going to do this and Harris is going to do that. I'm like, well, that's not true either. But that's, Jeb Bush used to say politics ain't beanbag, which is not something I fully understood. But I think what he means is like all's fair in love and war, and this is politics. And like there's going to be mudslinging. There's going to be lies. We're going to point fingers back and forth. We're going to stretch the truth. But I did sit there and try and be as fair as I could down the stretch and be like, man, there's a lot of this going back and forth. We're going to put a pin into this part of the debate. We are going to revisit it. But for now, we're going to take a quick visit with our sponsors, our friends over at Public. Heads up, folks, interest rates are falling, and they fell even more earlier today with the Fed announcement. The good news is you could still lock in a 7% yield with a bond account from our friends at Public.com. It's a pretty big deal. It's a very big deal because when rates drop, so can the interest you earn on your investment. A bond account lets you lock in a 7% yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds. So while other people are watching their returns shrink, you could sit back with regular interest payments. But you might want to act fast because your yield is not locked in until you invest. The good news, it only takes a few minutes to get signed up. Scan the QR code. You're off and running before you know it. Lock in a 7% yield with a bond account only at public.com/CT. Let's bring back in Diana. Diana, I want to get your sense here as a Republican. Talk to me about what you think the new look Trump administration is going to look like. There's all this chatter about the role of an Elon Musk, of a Bobby Kennedy Jr., who's going to get a secretary job, who's going to have the ear of the president in the second term, considering the fact so many people in the first term are no longer around. Donald Trump's excommunicated them, and they're definitely not supporting his candidacy.
Yeah. Well, I think that we can already predict what Trump is going to do because Trump is the same person that he's always been. He likes to surround himself with people who are business people, who have real world experience, who align with him on, his vision for America and who are going to work as hard and as fast as he does. He's a doer. Trump sleeps 3 to 4 hours a night. God bless him. I wish I could be more like him.
Yeah, me too.
I think about it. I'm like, I'm 38 and I'm over here on a 3-week sprint around the country. And I'm thinking, oh, when am I going to sleep? But not him. That man gets up. He is unlike anybody that I know. And he demands excellence from everyone around him because he demands what he does. So I think we're going to see a lot of Elon Musk and the same people that have been advising him around him, who are business owners, that, part of our oil industries. And you can just pick it. You'll see a lot of the people that he has been surrounding himself through this administration or through his campaign are going to be some of the same people that will be in power. As for who he's going to appoint to different positions, I think there's a lot of conversations out there, but I just don't quite know yet. But I think that we'll see coming in the next few days, we'll start to hear more media outlets talk about as the transition team gets together. I mean, for what I was told today in a meeting with some of his top advisors, he's already in the transition mode. So he has meetings galore at Mar-a-Lago. He is talking to world leaders. I know he's focused on the economy, so he is tackling that right now. And he's focused on energy, oil and gas. So drill, baby, drill. He's already putting his people in place who are going to try to get the price of gas down as fast as we can, get our oil rigs up and running, and let's go. Let's continue our energy independent, which will help with inflation. And immigration, he's already talking about it today. He's going to be focused on that as well. So I think that those who have already been, on the circuit in the media discussing those things, you'll find them in Trump's administration as well. So I think that's what we're going to expect. Elon Musk will have a pivotal role in Trump's administration, and RFK, with health. I think it's important. I think we could probably all agree in this country that our health departments and the health of our citizens is in rapid decline. Obesity we are the highest in obesity around the world. Our food is the things that are in our food that we feed ourselves and our children. You can't get that overseas in other areas. They banned those things. So I think the American people see that. I think our health has declined because of our foods and because of, just the way that our health industry is. And I think it's time that we start to address those things. Big corporations who chock full our kids with all these different foods and then they market them like crazy, like they're okay and they're good. It's time to have that conversation. It's an uncomfortable conversation. A lot of people will be out of a job. A lot of industries will fizzle because of that. But I think as a nation, we should prioritize our health because it is something that is a strain on our health system. People are going to the doctors all the time with health problems. And a lot of that has to do, we could debate that all day, but the reality is if we prioritized our health, if we ate better, if we promoted exercise more, if we taught our children to prioritize their health, because that's the key to a long-term success in our life, then I think that's beautiful for our nation. So I'm glad that RFK is there to continue that conversation and the vaccines. And I'm all about, let's just have the conversation. Let's put it out on the public square. Let's debate it, because that's going to be the best outcome. And I don't know a lot about some of it, but I want to learn, and I want the best for our country and our people. And Elon Musk, Chris, God bless him.
Yeah. Chris, what most worries you about the people that Donald Trump will surround himself with for a second term? But to Diana's point, are there things that make you say, you know what, I may not agree with Bobby Kennedy Jr. on this and that. I may not really like Elon Musk on these other things, but at least these people may bring this to the table. And as a liberal, all right, may not want to admit it, but maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing.
I'm literally smiling to stop from crying. Okay. That's what this comes down to.
Talk to me. Why?
Well, let's look at it. His foreign policy pros. When you are directly asked, hey, are you going to help out Ukraine if you become president? He said, well, I'll stop the war. Are you in support of Ukraine being a sovereign nation? I'm just going to stop the war. No, that's not helpful. When it comes to his issues that deals with Palestinians in Gaza, these people are being massacred at an alarming rate. And to say that you're going to go ahead and give even more bombs and more ammunitions to Israel, well, unfiltered within this. Let it be clear. There should not be anyone in the Jewish nation that should be murdered at any time. That's it. Gaza, everything that's happened, Hezbollah, those are terrorist organizations, and they should be wiped out, but not with civilian populations within it. So that's foreign policy. I already talked about the tariffs on the Chinese. Domestically, when you're talking about taking fluoride out of our water supply, that's an issue. When we're talking about eliminating the Department of Education, when we already are in a horrible position in the world when it comes to literacy, and it's getting worse. That's pretty bad. I don't see a common thread when it comes to anyone that he's going to pick. And my final point with that is his last administration did have people who were actually astute in certain areas within his cabinet. I think that we can all agree to that. He's not bringing back anybody from his cabinet because no one else would want to serve under him from his former cabinet. The same people who said he's a danger to the democracy, he's a danger to the world, and he's a danger to America are the same people that he picked that served under him. So these other people that are coming in that he's going to select, I would ask the American people within it, you take an oath of office to uphold the Constitution. I hope they continue and that they do uphold that instead of saying a loyalty clause to President Trump. That's when it's going to become a problem and our democracy becomes in danger.
I mean, Diana, I gotta say, I think Chris brings up a good point in that Donald Trump does tend to surround himself with yes people. There are enablers. There are people, right? I mean, I was a Trump White House reporter for the 4 years he was down there. And there was a lot of people who, like, if you said something out of line, if you kind of disagreed with the big guy, you were probably going to be on the receiving end of a critical tweet. You're probably going to be out of a job. And it's a lot of those same people that came this election were like, for the love of God, I am supporting anyone not named Donald Trump. And that means any other Republicans in the primary field, or even going as far as to say, I've never voted for a Democrat, but I got to vote for Vice President Harris. Diane, does that concern you that the president may surround himself with people who simply tell him what he wants to hear? Or is your approach like, listen, Trump won the election. He won tens of millions of votes. He's got a nearly 5 million vote margin. And if Trump wants to surround himself with people that will reinforce his instincts, that is maybe not a bad thing.
Well, I want to remind everyone that Trump was in office for 4 years and the world didn't fall apart and the economy was good. And so I think people are going to come and go in an administration. So Christopher, I don't believe you've worked in government, have you? Sorry, I can't remember your full background. And I'm not asking that.
No, it's okay.
Okay, I dig at you. But I have worked in government at the state level and also at the federal level in Congress where bills are made. And I had to work with the Trump administration during his 4 years. And it's a little bit different with government and getting people to work in government. So you can have a whole laundry list of people that you want to come work for you. And if they can't get approved within the federal government to take those jobs, you got to move on to the next person who can't get approved. So let's keep that in mind, that those that do actually make it into an administration, into the White House, there's vetting and there's things that have to happen and qualifications that would have to keep them there to be qualified. But Trump is a rare breed of a person to work for and with, and he demands excellence. He, it's not that he demands loyalty, but he believes that there's a mandate on his time in office and what the American people want. And he's a man of his word. So if he comes out and says, I'm going to fix the economy, I'm going to lower the price of gas, I'm going to end these wars, I'm going to do this, then he knows he's a prideful man. And actually, I like that in my president. I want my president to be prideful about his word and what the American people think, because he's focused on his legacy. So when it comes, I'm not going to get into the weeds of people who former worked for the president and their rage against him, because we don't know the full story. And, we weren't in the room when the resignations happened and what happened. We don't know that. But I know that he's the president of the United States. What he wants is what he should get from those that he appoints in those cabinets. And he has a mandate from the American people with his agenda, and he wants to see it get done. Oh, but Christopher, I did want to expound a little bit upon your comments regarding international relationships and things that he talks about with Ukraine and Russia and all that. Because you haven't worked in government and in
I think I did. I did work in government.
You did work in government.
Let's make sure we're not doing any more misinformation, like you said before. But continue.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know what I was asking is I don't know what level of government you've worked in when it card.
Well, we can have that conversation later.
Okay, great. So we all know that when you are discussing foreign policy, when wars are going on, you don't go out. First of all, he's not the sitting president, but you don't go out and tell people what you're going to do. So, okay, what are you going to do? Are you going to invade somewhere the next day? You don't go on television and say, tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'm going to invade this country. Donald Trump wasn't the president at that time. And he knows that whatever he says is going to, he believed he was going to be reelected president. And he wants to go in with the ability to make deals, to end the war. And he's not going to pigeonhole himself and decide here into a certain, stance that would hurt a negotiation when he does become president. And so I like that about him. The American people do too. But what he said is what the American people wanted to hear. He wasn't going to tell them what he was going to do. He said, I want these wars to end. I want people to stop dying. He's going to do whatever it takes to get those leaders in a room to end the war and to negotiate peace, and so that people will stop dying. And any normal American who's sitting around the table, that's exactly what they want to hear. They don't really necessarily care what he's going to do to make that happen. They trust that Trump's going to stop this from happening. And so I think that that's good messaging, quite frankly. And I think that the world actually wanted to hear more of that, because under Joe Biden, we got into 2 wars that would have never happened under Trump. You know why? It's because they feared that man, because they didn't know what he was going to do, but they knew that he meant business. And so when he looked at Iran and said, if you do this, we will end you, they believed it. And when he showed, leaders of certain groups pictures of their homes and said, I know where you're at. And they said, sir, what does that mean? And he says, you don't really have to, it means exactly what it means. I know where you're at. They feared that man. And they know that Trump is going to do what's in the best interest of our country. And he wants peace. I mean, nobody ever talked about it. He negotiated all these peace deals before he got out of. Jared Kushner with all of these nations and Israel. I mean, people were at peace. They were excited. And all of that went away as soon as he was out of office. And the American people remembered that. It wasn't just what he was saying on there. He was action. And so, again, you may say, oh, this is, talking, bad and talking about his judgment and all these things that he said. But the American people knew, frankly, that he was going to fix this issue. He did when he was in office. There was no new wars. The foreign leaders, they respected him. They weren't talking bad about him. They were working with him. And, to go with the tariffs too. Part of Trump saying those things.
Diana, I got to pop in here and kick it back to Chris, but I'll let you wrap up that last thought if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You're telling me foreign leaders never said anything bad about the former president? Like this continues to happen. So let's set the record straight. Donald Trump actually said that he does stand behind Israel. He did not say that about Ukraine. So we'll go with that point. Again, when it comes down to the people that you pick within your cabinet, within a confirmation process, because you did work in government, you do know about how that happens. Those are the same people, your Secretary of Defense, your Attorney General, your National Security Advisor, who has said that he is unfit for office. That did not happen under Obama's administration. That did not happen under Bush's administration. That did not happen under Clinton's administration. That did not happen under Reagan's administration. That did not happen on the other Bush's administration. He is uniquely disqualified for this type of office because of that. And it's not Democrats who are saying it. It is literally Republicans that he picked. I don't know another way to say that. So when it comes down to what is he going to do, the question is, what is he going to do for the American people? Because I can go up and say that those Americans that have served under him said, we're going to stand up for the Constitution because we do believe that. We're not going to stand up for the ideals of someone who picks his son-in-law to go run a Middle Eastern campaign that has us in these type of situations that we have right now. So there's nothing really much to go on and on about. When it comes down to it, yes, foreign nations are afraid of this. If he came out and said, I'm not standing by the United Kingdom, that would be a problem. Those are allies that we've stood by for literally decades. He needs to make a stance on these type of things. And when you're saying that you're not going to stand by Ukraine, when you're saying that you're going to give it to a dictator like Putin, that sends a signal to the rest of the world that, yes, we're not safe. And the instability that happens within the entire world reverberates throughout. So, no, you said people are feared. I'm feared. Sure. I don't know what's going to happen next.
I understand. And obviously there's lots of people who feel similarly on both sides. Man, I hate to stop the flow of conversation where you're both cooking, but in a respectful way, right? And that's what we want on the show, right? I want different perspectives of the same things. Like, you're both in the kitchen cooking. What am I going to pop in and like bother you both for? Except that we have to get to an ad break. Yeah, there you go. Hey, we're all cooking here. So let's do that. Let's take Diana and Chris down, and let's hit to our sponsors. Listen up, folks. Time could be running out to lock in a historic yield over at public.com. History making week indeed. But you can lock in a 7% or higher yield with a bond account. But here's the thing. The Federal Reserve just announced yet again another interest rate cut. It was just a few hours ago. The plans for more rate cuts this year, probably one in December, a handful in 2025 as well. It's good news if you're looking to buy a home, you're trying to pay off debt, but it might not be so good for the interest you can earn on the cash you already have. So if you want to lock in a 7% yield with a diversified portfolio of high yield and investment grade corporate bonds, you might want to act quickly. The good news, it only takes a couple minutes to sign up. Trust me, I did it. I've been with Public for a long time. You scan that QR code, it's right there on your screen. Boom, boom, boom. You're off and rolling. Couple minutes, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Gives you everything you need to know. Once you lock in your yields, you can earn regular interest payments, even as interest rates continue to decline. And trust me, they will continue to decline. Lock in the 7% yield with a bond account at public.com/CT. But hurry, your yield is not locked in until you invest. Let's bring in Diana and Chris back again. But do you both have a few more minutes? Are we up against a hard out? I just want to check. Yeah. Diana, you good to hang for a few more? Chris, you good?
Keep going.
Good.
Let's keep going.
Keep going. Oh, we're cooking. We're cooking. We're not stopping. Okay, here's a really great user question. This is actually, I'm just gonna be honest. This is my good friend Danielle. I put this up on my Instagram earlier. I wanted to get users to submit a question. So I'm going to start this one off with Chris. She asks, did high inflation and costs make a Trump win inevitable, regardless of the Democratic strategy? Chris, we know at least 27% of Americans, they were polled ahead of the election. They said, what is your top issue you're voting on? And they all said the economy. I mean, was this an inevitable outcome, regardless, because of those key pressure points on pricing?
It's always the economy. So it's very rare that you do have a campaign or any type of issue when it comes down to it's not going to be the economy. So yes, high inflation did play a major part within it. And messaging on how to get down high inflation is something. I mean, your promo code is just talking about the interest rates going down. So this problem is being fixed within it. But when it comes down to it, the American people wanted a fix, and they wanted to fix right now. And if you cannot message that to the American people, then hey, the American people may find another option. Now, that option being the former president, it's a different issue. But when it comes down to it, you could have put up Biden. You could have put up Gavin Newsom. There would have been a problem with the American people, with anybody under this situation within it.
Diana, what do you think about that? I mean, I'm really interested in Chris's last point there. It's like, it doesn't matter what other candidate you had there. You just had some fundamental economic issues on top of messaging. But Diana, what are your thoughts there?
Well, I think he's right. I mean, personally, I believe that Trump is the best person to fix those issues for this reason. Chris and JD, remember, Trump was president for 4 years, okay?
He was.
People remembered the economy under Trump. They remember, just the lowest. We had low interest rates. We had unemployment was the lowest it had been almost in history, at least in our lifetimes and in our parents too. They remember no new wars. They remember the economy was cooking, man. I mean, people were investing all over. They were building houses. My dad was a developer. My mom owns a real estate company. Just things were cooking. It was on fire. And then there was a staunch difference between a Biden-Harris administration. It just was doom and gloom. And
here's my thought. I'm gonna interrupt Diana for 1 second. And it just keeps on with what you're saying. So I'm not dramatically reverting course here. I gotta say in good faith, Obama got handed, pardon my language, Barack Obama got handed a shit economy, and he brought it back. Joe Biden got handed a shit economy because of a pandemic, and he brought it back. Donald Trump is now about to inherit, for the most part, not his first, but his second pretty sterling economy, all things considered. It's easy to have low interest rates and low borrowing costs when times are good and money is easy to flow around the system. That is absolutely the set of economic situations that Trump inherited in early 2017. And yeah, we got some pricing problems, but again, Trump's about to inherit an environment where interest rates are coming down, which is rocket fuel on the markets. Unemployment's near a historic low. We just got a GDP reading a few days ago for the third quarter at 2.8%. I mean, Diane, you got to admit, the economic circumstances Trump has been handed that he's going to start off with again are way different than these other Democratic presidents.
Can you add the infrastructure bill, which will be beneficial?
Sure. Let me get Diana in.
I think we'll see about the infrastructure bill, by the way. So when I was in Congress, we were working on infrastructure, passing things, the USMCA with trade, and also there was already a lot of work that had been done prior to that. So I think we'll continue to see what happens with that. Okay, so regarding Trump inheriting Obama economy, and then also one thing that I do want to address with this is the Biden administration likes to come in and say, oh, they inherited such a mess with the Trump economy and COVID and all this stuff. Okay. Part of the reason why there was a bounce back in some senses because Trump had created such a strong economy before COVID. And nobody gave him, Biden and them just tried to erase the American people's memory of what was happening prior to COVID. And with Trump handling COVID, and if it wasn't for such a strong economy going into COVID, it would have been terrible than what it was. But because the economy was so strong, the jobs were so high, the GDP and all these things were so great with Trump, we were able to maintain. But what the American people also saw was a total lie from Joe Biden and his administration about the jobs that they were creating. And they were not new jobs. They were jobs that people had lost that they came back after COVID. And so they were trying to tout, oh, the economy's roaring, we're creating all these jobs. They were not new jobs. They were just jobs that people had lost during COVID. And those jobs were coming back and they were fulfilling those jobs again. But if you look at the actual new job growth, it is very little compared to jobs. Trump, they were not all those new jobs under Obama. They were certainly, there were a lot of new government jobs. There were a lot of new, certain sectors. But as a whole, if you look at the new job growth that when Trump came into office, these were new jobs because new industries were created. People were taking foreign industries and bringing them into the United States and building those factories here and building those jobs. There were so many new job creations under Trump that did not happen under Obama because Trump is a more business-free, free market, policy-driven, where he was taking the he was taking the pressure from the thumbs up. He was taking all the regulations, AI agrees with me.
I know, it happens all the time.
He was taking the regulations away so that we could build bridges faster. He was taking regulations away from a lot of other things, which is pro-business. So we saw more new job growth under Trump than we ever did under any other president because of that. And I think we're going to see the same with when it comes to Trump versus Biden. Biden has the new job growth does not exist because the economy is stifled and there's no confidence within the business community, which is one thing you always see. When the business community is not confident, they don't grow. They don't employ people. They just hold tight and they wait for growth. Now you're going to see a lot of confidence under Trump. So they're just going to say, hey, we know that he's not going to regulate. We know that he's going to let us create jobs and he's going to let us bring businesses here and he's going to be open to that. So they're going to grow. We're going to see a lot of new job growth. So those are my thoughts on that.
Chris, I'm not even going to ask a question. I'm just going to kick back to you if there's anything you want to respond to.
Oh, well, again, let's deal with facts again, okay?
Let's do it.
You had W, who gave Obama a horrible economy, and it was Obama who brought back the economy. Then you had Trump, who benefited from that economy that went down into COVID. Now, is COVID Trump's issue? Was it his fault? I'm not going to say once in 100 years pandemic was his fault, but I can say that the fact that he completely defunded our CDC and emergency response probably exacerbated the problem because we probably could have gone through this a lot easier and a lot better. And I think that's what the American people do remember. They remember a Donald Trump who had absolutely no idea how to deal with the pandemic, not on a business side, but literally a people side. When he was saying, again, that we can put on a neon light to kill COVID, people remember that. When people say you can take a horse dewormer to get rid of COVID, you can remember that. When he only went into the situation room 4 times the entire time during COVID happened, people remember that. So those type of things will go into this upcoming administration. And this is why a lot of people do not have faith in him to deal with it. As much as people did vote for him, there were a lot of people who did not vote for him because they do remember what happened during the times of COVID and during the times before COVID had happened. Can you imagine, guys? Are we really going to have to go back to every day hearing a tweet from the former president and everybody's just going to go wild about it? Do we have to go through another Muslim ban? Do we have to go through all this over and over again? That's what we're going to have to expect these upcoming 4 years. And thank God it's only going to be 4 years, because when it comes down to it, the American people want normalcy. They want to be able to come together and speak to each other. This hyper partisanship needs to stop. We do need to come together. And I don't think that the former president is the person who can actually do that. People were looking for another way out when it came to this type of situation. So again, the economy is the economy. Like you said before, nobody's saying the economy is bad. People are saying that inflation is high. No one is saying that we need to replace the economy with another economy of another country. People are saying that my rates are high. Credit card debt is high at this time. That is a situation that we have to deal with. But the issue that we're going to have to deal with the most is, what is Donald Trump going to do about it? When he's going to do tax cuts for the ultra rich, that is going to divest in our infrastructure, that's going to divest in our education system, and it's going to divest in healthcare. Healthcare, the Affordable Care Act, was passed under Obama. That has helped out more Americans than anything else. And guess what? Goal is not to treat cancer. The goal is not to get cancer in the first place. And that's why you do need real healthcare. If you try to, which he unsuccessfully did, take out the Affordable Care Act, then people will be hurtful and actually die. So when it comes down to it, we will find out what happens within these 4 years. And people are going to reminisce on Biden. And they're going to say again, Biden was actually a great president. And the economy was doing so well. And then Trump's going to destroy it. And we'll have another Democrat back in office. And we'll continuously play these games until we actually do come together and say, what is the best thing for the American people?
I just sort of wonder. Oh, Diana, go ahead.
So the people did remember, and they resoundingly came out the polls in droves to vote for Donald Trump. And they remembered what it was 4 years around here, but they also were afraid of the safety in this country, the wars that were happening, inflation, the economy in general. They were afraid. And, you know, regardless of how you spin it, Christopher, and what you say about that, the people of this country came out in droves to vote for that man. And because they believed that he was exactly who was going to be able to fix the issues that were plaguing them. But I do want to talk about healthcare real quick, because you made a comment about that. My father died of cancer in April, and it was devastating to our family. But one of the reasons why it was devastating was because prior to Obamacare, my dad had access to all different types of health plans, and he chose one. He was a business owner, so he was a private business owner, so he was able to go on and pick health insurance privately. When Obamacare came into place, he lost his coverage, and it was so expensive to get the coverage that he did have that he went and he had to pick a lower coverage. Well, in that lower coverage, he was shackled into some of the testing and stuff that he could get. And my dad had a feeling that something was wrong with him, but he was so afraid to go to the doctor because he thought it was going to financially cripple him. And by the time my dad did go and get tested, he was stage 4 with prostate cancer that had spread. And we were devastated because if we would have just known, we would have figured it out. But because of the healthcare system and the policies that we have, it failed my dad. He had to wait till he could get Medicare and get to the age that it would have a supplement plan and cover it. And so Obamacare was not the answer. Prior to Obamacare, he had great insurance, and the market was open where he could pick, and he was safe with that. But once it came, he was shackled with Obamacare and the policies that they have. And my mom is the same on us as a small business owner as well. So again, I know this is a deeper conversation, but I understand firsthand what the problems are. And we have to fix those. This is unacceptable. Like people, my dad, who are 67 years old, are now not with us anymore because of our health care and how unaffordable it is to everyday Americans. So I just want to say that, and I've dedicated my time now to work with policymakers to make sure that we can cover pre-existing conditions, that we could cover pre-screenings of health, and people don't have to break the bank to go and get blood testing and to have markers in place of where their health are. So if there is an elevation in their blood levels, that we can fix that now, and they don't have to worry about, healthcare bankrupting them. So Obamacare was not the answer. And even though I know the sentiment was there and we all want that, but it's broken. It has to be fixed. So
Sure.
Christopher, I just wanted to share that.
First off, my condolences towards
Thank
that.
you.
And sorry to hear about that. When it comes down to it, I will stand side by side with you with passing a universal health care bill. No one has to deal with that within their families. I think that's something, again, Americans can come together and say there's certain things that people should have automatically, not just as Americans, but as humans. And no one should go through that.
Yeah, and I look forward to working, we're common threads here, but I do think that this is not a partisan issue. Now, how we fund it and how we get through it, obviously, there's different ideas of that, but I think together we can all come up with solutions that really will benefit our country. And that's one of them. Health, back to RFK, regardless if we agree on some of the things that he says. I don't agree with everything, but I agree with that the conversation, it's time to have it. And let's not be afraid of it. Let's have the conversations. Let's come up with the best outcomes that will benefit our country in the long term and our children and all of that. And so I'm not afraid to have those controversial conversations. I love it.
Well, Diana, first of all, let me express my gratitude for you being willing to share that. And as Chris said, of course, we all send you our deepest condolences. I truly hope your father's memory is nothing but a blessing for you and your family. And obviously, if that kind of helps shape your view and your role in politics and being able to sound off on these things, all the better. And I appreciate that we were able to kind of bring together, find a little bit of a commonality there towards the end. So let's conclude with this before we get to our last segment here. Just one question to each of you, and I'll start with Chris. How does the country move forward at this point? Obviously, and I'm looking here at the latest New York Times number, 73 million voters for Donald Trump, 68, almost 69 million for Kamala Harris. I mean, I feel like we have been in this place where both sides was just terrified of what happens if the other side wins. Both sides frame this as an existential crisis, but if the union is going to endure, as Abraham Lincoln famously said, there's got to be some degree to where we push this aside. Chris, start with you. Where do we go from here so that the next 4 years, 8 years, 20 years are not needlessly divisive?
Yeah, I'll put out with those numbers too. 73 million for the former president, 68 million for the current vice president. But there are also 60 million people who did not vote. 60 million people who are eligible to vote who didn't. And we need to hear from their voices as well. We need to be in every community, not just on the federal level, but in local levels of saying we are a nation of freedom. And yet we imprison more people per capita than any other nation in the world. We're ninth in literacy and we're horrible on healthcare. There are plenty of things that we can react to together to make common solutions within it. And we need to talk to everyone in a political discourse. Again, we're not going to agree on everything, but we can agree that we are Americans, the people who are here that should not be mass deported. And we can all go together and make sure that we can have a common thread, which is our people. Humans are humans. And if we can stick to that, then I think we can come together again as a nation.
Diana, how about you? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think we go just what we're doing right now. We're talking. And as long as we're talking and we're communicating and we're sharing ideas, then the health of our nation is strong. But there is a resounding mandate on the Trump administration to deliver what they promised the American people that they will do. And those were some very bold things that they promised. And the American people said, yes, we want it, and let's do it. And so I think that that is going to, we have the Senate and we have the House as of now. Obviously what the margins are going to be, we'll find out when it's all said and done. But as of now, it looks like it's going to be a pretty significant win for the House and the Senate. And so, again, that is a resounding message from the American people. We want the Trump administration's agenda, and that is the economy, that is immigration, that is stopping the foreign wars. And so I think that what we're going to see, though, is that we're going to see both sides work together to get some of those things done. Policy is.
Go ahead, Diana.
Policy and Congress stuff, it's not a pretty thing. We argue, but at the end of the day, I think that if we're communicating, we'll get it done. And I do also believe that the American people are ready for the discord to turn down, and so is Trump. And I think you would be very surprised, Christopher, of the tone of Donald Trump during this presidency. I've spoken to his top advisors, and he is ready to unify this country and move forward, because he was almost killed twice. And he understands firsthand that the climate and the temperature needs to come down. It's unacceptable that we would kill a person in our country because they believe something different from us. So it's going to come from the top. I think we will see it. I think we will see a lot of people unify. And Christopher, I hope you and I can be a part of the process together, and we can come up with some great policy, and we can help the Trump administration create policy for all. But also, one last word. One thing Trump said in one of his last rallies is that the Republican Party is now the party of the working class. And we've seen that switch in the political system now. And he also said that the Republican Party is the big tent party now. We want everybody in there. We want all ideas. Let's talk about it, debate it. So I think you will see that in his presidency. He will lead with that. He will bring big tent people in like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK and Elon Musk. These guys they're not Republican, and they helped deliver a resounding victory for him. So I think you're going to see that tone set, and I hope that in the end, our country wins.
I hope we do. Yeah, I hope we do. Listen, I've never subscribed to the idea that, just because my president didn't win, that person's not my president. You're the president of the United States. If there's going to be one U.S. today and one U.S. moving forward, I did sense after the assassination attempts a little bit of a softening to Donald Trump, just a little bit. And I got to say that I do hope that he is humble in victory. Because if there's one thing that I think, it's not about the economy, it's not about tariffs, it's not about, China or establishing a relationship with North Korea or anything like that. There's a lot of good stuff that he did, but man, it's the character stuff that I think drove people absolutely nutty. It's calling someone horseface while he's sitting there on Twitter behind the Resolute desk. That's the type of stuff that I think the average American goes, all right, dude, you really, I get it. You got no more campaigns left to run at this point. So if this is it for Donald Trump in the public arena, I really hope that you're right, Diane. I hope we just take that edge off and that there is some kind of commonality to move forward. All right, time now for our last fan favorite segment of the show. Let's get to it.
Say something.
Nice.
Sponsored, of course, by our friends over at Public. I'm going to start with Diana here because I want to give Chris the last word of the show. Diana, obviously, your side is the victor in all of this, but I would encourage you. I'm asking you to say something nice about the Democratic Party, about these scores of Americans who are clearly heartbroken today, and about the degree to which maybe you as a Republican or you hope that President Trump are willing to not ignore those voices. Say something nice about the other side that leaves us with a nice feeling of optimism.
I'll say this, Chris, I think you're great. These conversations have been great with you. And, one thing I appreciate about both political sides is their love for this country, whatever it may be that drives them. They still love this country and they're passionate about moving it forward. And so I appreciate your love for our country. I appreciate the ideas that you have to make sure that every American citizen has a voice. And so I echo your sentiment with those who are not voting. It's unacceptable. We live in the greatest country in the world. There's no other country like us. If you travel around the world, you notice that America is the beacon on the hill, and we want to keep it that way. And I appreciate you wanting to do that too. And so, I think that I love that you love our country. And as long as we continue loving our country, we can work anything out, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's no doubt from listening to Chris the better part of the last hour that this is a man who loves his country. I would say that about both of you as well. So, Chris, obviously here, I know it's difficult for Democrats to pick up the pieces. Give me something nice here. It could be about Trump, could be about a Republican agenda, something that gives you a little bit of optimism to say, well, at least we got this going for us.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I do love this country. I am the son of an Army colonel, and my mother still teaches at her local high school. So I believe this is the greatest country in the world, which has the best potential in the world as well. And that's why I think me and Diana can agree on a common thread about this. America is a great country, and it can be better. I'm not going to say we're going to make it great again because I'm trying to figure out what happened in the first place for what type of people, which goes along with why people run for office in the first place. Donald Trump said he stepped up. He said, I want to make a change in this country. And he put his name on the ballot. You have to respect that when it comes down to it. And other people who do serve our country, enlisting in our military to make sure that we're protected and also running for office to be admired. So, Diana, I appreciate your service to our country, serving in the government, something else that we have in common. And that I think and I know that we can work together in the future.
That's awesome. I'm really grateful to both of you. That's my favorite show we've done yet. I mean that sincerely. Diana London, Christopher Bruce, my special thanks to both of you. My special thanks to everyone watching at home. We'll do this again next week. We'll see you then.